tente des choses.
On est
Elle tente des choses.
Oui. On commence par dépenser, puis après ça, on est dans l'été.
Oui.
Puis après ça, ben, c'est quoi? Les parties.
Well, let's finish the next discussion and see how it goes. Madame, on est correct sur le webcast?
Oui.
Oui.
J'ai le temps.
Mr. Bisson will be back in a second.
Non, mais... C'est ça.
Et voilà. Allez-y, Monsieur le Duc, Monsieur Godin.
Merci, monsieur le maire.
Make our dreams come true.
No
pressure. No pressure.
Merci, c'est 49. Il est au max avec 60 millions.
All right, so we prepared a few slides. Basically, it's really to share a lot of information with council, to present certain options, how we can start to prepare for a large investment. None of this really affects the 2019 budget per se, except for the fact that we're contributing $150,000 to the sports zone this year. That's all. From all I'm going to show you right now, that's all that's in the budget at this point in time.
Right.
But we do, especially if we're talking about having the shovel in the ground before the end of this term, it would be wise to start, obviously, like you mentioned multiple times, having a plan. So basically, what we're going to show you is two options, two scenarios, basically. We're not necessarily saying we should do this. We're proposing this. It's kind of to give you
An idea.
Of what the numbers look like, taking into consideration our debt capacity and all this. So basically, what we're showing you is a kind of strategy that would do two things. First of all, satisfy the finance portion of the sports zone project. Then having a kind of strategy to raise funds for an eventual rec complex, and to gradually develop the financial capacity for the township to be able to satisfy debt payments if it comes down to that.
Okay.
All right. So this first slide is really just to put some perspective on debt and what a long-term loan means. When the table here basically just shows, when I say total cost of borrowing, it's going to show you, for example, a simple example, the first one, for $20 million, if we do a $20 million loan over 20 years at 3.4%, that would represent a total of $27.8 million if we include the capital and the interest.
In interest. Just to be clear, the figures you're pulling now, the 3.4, 3.58, 3.62.
Yes. So those numbers are the numbers as of today from Infrastructure Ontario. So basically, if we were to take a loan out today for those amounts and with those terms, those would be the interest rates associated to those lengths.
Right.
So
And it would be locked in at that amount for that period of time.
that's right. Yes.
It's not like a house mortgage where you got
Right.
to redo in 5 years.
Exactly. So every time we do a loan, we still do the process. We look at the rates for the banks and stuff like that. So there is always a possibility of having 5-year terms that's going to be renewed at different rates in 5 years. Typically, lately, most of the loans that we've been doing lately, not all, have gone with Infrastructure Ontario because they often have lower rates and the term is fixed for the full term.
Good.
Basically. So this is really to give you some perspective of the cost of borrowing. We're going from 20 million to 40 million, from 20 years to 30 years, just to give you the concept of what it costs. So these numbers, you'll notice I've included 22 million in there. The reason being that right now in the DC study, the rec complex project is identified as 22 million. Is that going to be it? We don't really know. We don't have a plan concept established yet, and there will be other financing. There's going to be DCs and stuff like that. So, but we wanted to put that number just so you have
An idea.
an idea. I'll show you after this slide, Schedule C. Basically, we're looking at two different scenarios. They're identical scenarios, but it's just different amounts. The idea is to increase the the municipal contribution towards this project every year. Option one, we're talking about $150,000. That means essentially we're putting $150,000 towards the dome this year. Next year, we would continue that 150 plus another one. So basically increasing it by 150 every year.
So you're talking about increasing the, not increasing that fund year after year after year after year.
Exactly, right? So once we've increased it this year to 150, so that the tax base is used to paying that, we increase it by another 150, so it's 300,
Right.
but 450 cumulative. And then if we keep on doing that, I'll show you the graphs or the tables to show what the impact is with that. And option two is going by 200,000 instead of 150.
Okay.
Nice through it, and that's safe.
And that's just for the loan repayment. It has nothing to do with operation increases or nothing like that.
Right, we're not
Just-
talking about operation.
Yeah, just loan
This is really just for
repayment.
the capital costs.
Okay.
It's to build up a reserve and then it's to have the capacity to pay loan payments. So let's just focus on this first page for now, which is option number one, $150,000 per year increase. If we just look at the first two rows at the top first, so you'll see basically what we're saying is in 2019, we're gonna contribute 150,000. 2020 is gonna be 300, 450 next year, 600, 750. We put the table all the way to 2028, just for your information, just so you can see what it would mean if we did in fact do the project in 2028. You'll see that I highlighted in blue 2023. The reason being that in the DC study, like I said earlier on, it's 22 million, and it was identified for 2023. So we don't have to keep that date as a project plan date, but I wanted to turn the attention there for that.
Have we determined, have we factored in at all a $35 million project today in 2028 will be a $40 million project, a $45 million?
Well, no, so this analysis here doesn't look at the actual project cost and what's gonna be included in that project. It's basically, if we do this, how much money do we have in the bank?
Right, okay.
Obviously,
Just one-
I haven't added
Indexing or anything like
indexing
that.
or interest revenue that we would have,
Right.
which would be probably not that significant.
Councillor Tarnowski?
Sorry, just a clarification, so under this plan, so the infrastructure fund reserve contribution is 150 per year, but you're just accumulating it, right?
No,
We're
so
increasing it.
the first row is actually the year's contribution.
Yeah.
The second row will be the cumulative reserve. You'll see in the first years it's negative. That's because we have an unfinanced portion for the sports zone. So basically years 2019, 2020, and a portion of 2021, the monies put there would be towards the financing of the dome. Once the dome is financed, then it's going into a reserve for a rec cost.
So for 2022, you're adding your 600 to the 170 left over from the year before, giving you 770, plus another 750 in 2023,
Right.
you're up to 1.5 million.
Right.
So it's a guarantee that we're increasing the infrastructure fund 1% every year, specifically to create a reserve for the dome, year after year.
But I'm still not clear on the reserve contribution. The contribution goes up. This is annual contribution, 150, then 2020, it's 300,000.
Yes.
And it's 450.
Yes.
Okay, but that's like an annual contribution. So in 2021, the annual contribution is 450,000 that's being put into it.
So in 2021, there's $450,000 of taxpayers' money going into this.
Okay.
But we're just, if we didn't have the debt of the dome, it would be 150 this year, then it would be up to 450 the next year because we added 300,000.
I'm sorry, maybe it's because it's 12 hours, but, but if I put aside $150 this year,
Yeah.
and then next year I'm gonna put it, my 150 plus another 150, so I'm gonna put away $300 next year and so on.
Now,
So,
now you're up to 450.
no, I get how it's adding up, but that means that I'm constantly increasing my contribution by 150 more
Yeah.
that
Every year.
particular year.
Yeah.
And how's that impact the tax base? Isn't that?
Well, so that's the point. So basically it's, if we use 150, it's a bit low, it's a bit lower than 1.5%, but let's just say, for example, that the tax increase, is, 1% is $100,000, so that 1.5% would be 150. So that means every year we would increase by 1.5%.
Okay.
And
I
that
guess
amount would
Specifically
be,
for that reserve.
that would be your tag for that.
On top of whatever operational, so
Right.
like, for example, 2% this year, if we went this route, well, it would be 2% plus the 1.5, so it would be 3.5 next year, and so forth.
I get it.
That's it. And it's just to, it's to show, because it is significant numbers every year. If we're increasing it by 150 every year. But it's to show as well that by doing that, year 2023, we've accumulated a reserve for about $1.5 million.
I'll say that he has a question.
Yes.
So I just wanted to clarify the comment that was just made about 2 to 3.5 to whatever. You've incorporated the 150 for this year in the 2% increase, correct? So there's nothing to say that next year, if you have another 2% increase, that 150,000 couldn't be incorporated into the 2%,
That's correct.
correct?
Correct.
And therefore, we wouldn't necessarily be going an extra 1.5% every year to do this. We're allocating that amount, but it's not specifically an increase for that amount.
No, but just to clarify, maybe it has been 12 hours, so I'll just, from my point of view, if we decided to incorporate it next year, it just means that we're taking 150 extra from the infrastructure fund that could be going elsewhere in roads and bridges, and we're just deciding to reallocate that to that reserve.
Correct.
Correct.
It doesn't mean the tax increase will go up by 1.5% over the two.
But
That's what I wanted to be
I'm
clear.
anticipating, because we saw earlier that there's already a asset management huge gap of over $2 million, that we don't want to create a higher gap as we go forward. So assuming we're keeping the same asset management level and the infrastructure at the same, and investing the same percentages, if you will, into asset replacement and infrastructure, that's where I'm saying we can just continuously take from the infrastructure fund and put it into the dome reserve. It just means our infrastructure fund's going to go down as as the reserve goes up.
Or staff finds the money elsewhere in either operations or grants or whatever.
Yes.
And growth. Right? If we're gonna grow on the commercial side and whatnot, then that's money that can be found operationally to make up for that amount, to continue to keep our actual rate increases to a minimum.
Right.
I just didn't, when you said 2% next year, 3.5, and I
Well,
just wanted to
it's
make sure that,
It's not necessarily a tax increase, it's a dedication of our resources. We're adding 1.5% this year is going towards the reserve, not necessarily an increase, but that 1.5.
1.25 dedicated to this program.
Yes, and it would be coming out, if we're not raising taxing, then we're taking it out of somewhere else. And my point is I don't want to create a larger replacement gap by just shuffling money and not,
Yeah.
So, Conseiller Brisson?
La seule question que j'ai, vraiment, est-ce que c'est vraiment la place d'en discuter comme c'est là, ou si on ne devra pas, notre première étape, avoir décidé de la firme, parce que quand on a eu la présentation, la firme
Mais
disent déjà, avec le financement, comment le faire, ils vont dire comment le prix pour qu'on sache, est-ce qu'on parle de 20 millions, est-ce qu'on parle de 60 millions,
ça,
avant de discuter de ça?
ça c'est juste.
La capacité d'emprunter.
Ouais, ça, c'est l'administration qui nous donne des chiffres. Si le conseil regarde les chiffres et décide, on ne fait pas rien, pourquoi qu'aller dépenser sur un consultant? Mais au moins, en engageant le consultant, qu'on ait une base d'informations pour comprendre dans quelle direction potentielle qu'on regarde. Oui, il peut y avoir des octrois, il peut y avoir d'autres façons de financer, mais je pense que c'est une bonne base de comprendre c'est quoi le potentiel d'impact. Oui.
Mais là, Donc, j'ai dit 2 ans. Mais là, techniquement, ça va, si tu augmentes comme de 150 000 à 300 000, ça veut dire que faut que tu aies été chercher l'argent quelque part. Fait que ça veut dire que tu vas être obligé d'avoir une augmentation.
Ben, on vient
Quasiment
juste
chaque
d'avoir
année.
toute cette
C'est ça.
discussion-là.
Non, ben je l'ai entendu. Là, mais-
Monsieur Leduc?
Est-ce que je peux suggérer qu'on continue la présentation parce que c'est
Ouais.
vraiment complexe, puis
Ouais.
de voir le plein portrait avant de commencer les détails de calculing?
Oui, allez-y, monsieur Leduc. Monsieur Godin,
C'est,
keep dazzling us.
Donc, juste, j'ai juste commencé par les débats arrangés. Est-ce que c'est clair, par exemple, I just want to make sure that it's clear so far just for the 2 first rows.
Yeah.
The first one being, this is the contribution from that year, the second one being the cumulative reserve.
Yes.
So essentially in 2023, we have a reserve of 1.5 million, and the tax base, the amount of taxation dollars that's currently allocated to this project is $750,000. So if that's clear, I'm going to go down to the lower table.
Okay.
So this lower portion is essentially project financing scenarios per year. So just to be clear, like all the years are there. This isn't anything that's cumulative or anything like that. This is just, if we look at 2023, this is how we could potentially finance at that year. If we're looking at 2026, this is how we could potentially finance it this year. So now let me just go into the details about what we're seeing.
And clarification.
Yeah, no, I figured. So let's just look at 2023 just for now, since that's the kind of reference date. We're looking at financing from 3 sources: a loan, contribution from reserve, and contribution from development charges. All right. For development charges, it's currently in the DC study at $4 million. We are expecting a review in 2021 and then again in 2026. So just expecting the overall Parks and Rec department's service level to have increased.
With the dome.
With the dome and with the Chaudière and stuff like that, where we're increasing our service. We're expecting that you know how we have a cap of how much we can get from DCs for projects, that's gonna go up a bit, so we'll probably be able to have a bit more funds from the DCs for this project at each update. So to reflect that increase, we're saying if we're doing this project after 2021, well, the DC portion is probably gonna be about 4.25, maybe a bit more, maybe a bit less. If we do it, we put another increase in 2026, just to reflect those DC updates. So if we're looking at 2023, we're looking at $4.25 million from DCs. From reserve, now I'm going down to up, because the first one is the complicated one. So the 4.25 is coming from DCs. 1.5 for the reserve. That corresponds to the cumulative reserve that we've identified on
150
top, right?
every year.
Exactly. So by 2023, we have $1.5 million in that reserve. The $10.7 million. So what this represents is so like I said, at this point, the tax base is paying $750,000 earmarked for this project. If we were to stop the increases there and make annual payments of $750,000 on a loan on 20 years, that would represent a $10 million loan, a $10.7 million loan.
Okay.
Alright. So we built up the capacity in 2023 to have a loan for $10.7 million, to have a contribution from reserve of 1.5, and to have $4.2 million from DCs, totaling $16.5 million. So if we ignore all the other factors that are going to come in, could be grants, could be partnerships and stuff like that. If we just look at those, that strict strategy of increasing by $150,000 yearly, this is kind of what this brings us. So if we compare it to $22 million, then there's another $5.4 million if we want to get to $22 million. That would have to be funded from, like I said, grants, partnerships, a larger loan, or fundraising. And
So
stuff like that.
based on that, and that's on a $22 million project.
Yes.
So based on that, if we had no other financing, in 2025, we'd have the capacity for that 22 million.
Yes, no, yeah, in 2020, yeah, if we were to wait until 2025,
Right,
this is what this table shows us, is that we would have that capacity for the 22.7 million.
yeah, assuming there was no grants and no, like, to cover that $5.4 million shortfall. So, but that's on a $22 million grant. If we wanted much higher, like if it was a 44 million,
Yes.
double those numbers, and we're looking way out.
Yeah, that's exactly correct. And just to clarify as well, I mean, the 10.7 million, for example, in 2023, this is with payments of 750,000. That's why I'm saying a solution could be to have a larger loan, but then we would have to increase the taxes again to pay for that loan.
And again, this is on the 20-year scenario. We still have the option of going to a 30-year scenario, which would lower the payments.
Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Brisson, conseiller Taransky.
C'est juste pour savoir, clarifier. Parce à 22 millions, c'est à peu près 2 rings qui parlent, qui est remplacement de nos 2 arénas. Mais je pensais que quand c'est le remplacement des 2 arénas, qu'on ne pouvait pas utiliser les DCs.
Monsieur Leduc?
Ce soir, membres du conseil, on ne parle pas
De-
what's in it.
Yeah.
Pool, 2, 3, 4 rings, I don't care. It's
Mais non, mais c'est pas ça.
seating, new library location, bandstand,
Whatever.
art
This
center.
this is just the value.
It's not, to us, it doesn't matter what's in there. Right now, only numbers to me.
Oui, je sais, mais le 4 millions, on ne peut pas aller le chercher si on faillait qu'un remplacement.
On comprend ça, mais on suppose que vous faites quelque chose avec les DC. Qu'est-ce que ça se fait, on ne sait pas, mais on
Ouais,
veut
so,
supposer.
essentiellement, nous autres, il faut qu'on réalise que, dépendant du projet, ça se peut qu'on perde accès à 4,2 millions.
C'est ça.
Mhm.
Councillor Kanowski?
You guys are really creative, I'm impressed. It's awesome. Couple of questions. The 22 million, obviously, if right now is the number being bantered about, by 2023, the buying power is not gonna be as good. The other thing on the 10.7 million, as a potential loan, you're saying would be offset because we'd be used to paying that 750,000. That wouldn't take into account any expenses of running the facility.
No, that's right.
Thank you.
Councillor Lorrain?
So under the scenario, let's say we decided in 2021 that we would break ground, and 2023 is when we'd have to start repaying. That at that time, the fund would be 750,000 under this scenario. However, if we were to continue to increase that for another 5 years, we would then be talking about a repayment of 1.5 million annually, which is double that, right? Even though we've got the facility at that point, we keep increasing for that additional 5 years, and then cap it at the 1.5 million repayment. That would then allow us to finance a larger amount over that period of time, correct?
That's correct. So yeah, we could get even more creative and continue increasing the tax increases for 5 more years or 10 more years or not. The analysis would just become getting even more complicated just to figure out the cash flow for those years. But yes, that's definitely.
Councillor?
Yeah.
Councillor Janoski?
The only problem there is that if we're gonna wait till 2028 to put a shovel in the ground, and we're.
Well, I'm not suggesting we're gonna wait till 2028 to put shovel in the ground.
Councillor Lorrain was suggesting if we, in
Sure.
2021, we make the decision, in 2023, we start paying the loan, but that 150 a year, that we keep it increasing, which
Yeah.
would help pay down faster, or,
You're shoveling the ground 2021, you don't start repaying until 2023 when it's built, right? So that's when you have to take out your loan 2023, but you don't stop your increases
Yeah,
on the
I get it.
first line, and you keep going for another 5 years to get it to 1.5 million as a repayment.
okay?
Just to add on that scenario, Just because I know we often do projects where they stay unfinanced until the project is complete and we do take out that loan. If the construction does take a couple of years, looking at if we're looking at a $22 million project, we probably would still have to have that temporary loan where we would pay interest throughout that period of time, but yeah, the basic principles is the same.
And everybody okay with this slide?
So
I
if
think
we-
you have it, I'm just gonna ask, I'm assuming there's a slide coming that shows the, how it'll impact our debt capacity. Okay, just check it, making sure.
So the next page is the same scenario, just summarized and stopped. We just focused on the 2023 and stopped it there. So basically, the exact same information you had in that other table, but just looking since 2023 was kind of the reference year. That's why we just wanted to present it again. So we can go straight to page 3. I think where we had
200 then?
the same idea. If we increase by $200,000 yearly instead of $150,000 yearly, in which case you'll see in 2023 we kind of have the capacity for 28 million instead of the 16.5 million that we had previously. Obviously, it's a bigger impact on the tax base on a yearly basis. It's just to show how, like, when we add those increases in this fashion, I mean, it can make a big difference.
And again, this is only based on a 20-year loan repayment. Now, I'm sure we didn't take into account, but out of this, like on the dome, we knew when it was presented to us that we were putting a certain amount every year for asset replacement down the road. This hasn't taken into account any of that stuff, right?
We're strictly looking at the capital costs. And we
Capital,
have
that's
not
it, that's
looked at operational numbers at all for this exercise.
Okay. Monsieur Leduc?
On va donner une ordre de grandeur dans les chiffres. I think we've been discussing this for quite a while now, and no numbers put on paper. Now there's some form of financing scheme. So it just gives you an idea of the size of the numbers when you're looking at what's not financed and what kind of a grant or application are we looking at from the feds and the province, depending on the scenario we're looking at. So we just want to give you a council an idea.
They give money out, do they?
Maybe from now to here, to then.
Isn't there gonna be a couple of elections in between there?
Yeah, hopefully.
Capitalize on.
Okay, what's new, Monsieur Godin?
I mean, so basically this is what we wanted to present, just to kind of give context about the numbers and what that could represent as a potential financing scenario for a rec complex. I did have another slide there, so the new one, PowerPoint. Right, so I just wanted to point out here that like this analysis here really didn't really consider these other possibilities, like maybe there could be possibilities for grants, partnerships, sponsorships, term loan or loan terms that are more flexible or longer period terms. And I said we didn't consider the reevaluation of our DC, but actually we did.
Food for thought.
Who put up this works?
Okay, was that the end of the presentation?
Yes.
Okay. Qu'est-ce qui reste? On est-tu...
Et donc, il reste les projets capitaux pour le parc industriel.
Okay.
Puis ensuite, les salles habituelles pour les sources de financement de capital. Donc, vite fait par rapport aux octrois et aux réserves, puis le tableau de dette, la capacité de dette. Ça serait peut-être bon qu'on discute également.
Hein? Qu'on discute?
Qu'on discute de la capacité d'emprunt.
Okay, so I'll ask the question. It's past 9 o'clock now. Anticipated time for what's left? It's going to, like, we haven't got into the requests from the public yet or any of that stuff. So, Demain? the ninth. So do we want to finish up, keep going till 9:30, and then come back tomorrow morning? Councillor Janowski?
I hate to be the wimp in the room, but, my brain's fried.
Okay.
And I don't think it's responsible, you know, to look at these really important things at this stage
Okay.
without giving it proper attention.
Everybody okay, we'll start back up? Just enough time to get 8 hours sleep and be back tomorrow morning? Oh, we got, just under 12 hours, so.
What do we anticipate tomorrow? Just, an idea.
We should be able.
Half a day?
Half a day.
Two and 2.5 hours, so by noon we should be out.
What, your section's left, and then we still have the, or is that including all the conversation on the request from the public? And all
That's what I'm saying, I'm
Okay.
thinking,
2.5, by noon we should be done.
we probably will have lunch before you go,
Okay.
because, I think we won't be done before 11:30 or so.
Okay. Perfect, so thank you very much, everyone. We just had, just past 12 hours, budget session, and, we'll see everybody back here at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Merci beaucoup.
Si tu vois,
Oh, yeah.
confirming.
Oh, sorry. Gotta be,
You can leave your stuff here as is,
yeah.
if you want to.
So just a confirming bylaw, that bylaw 2019-016 being a bylaw confirming the proceedings of council of the corporation township of Russell special council meeting held on January 4th, 2019, be read a first, second, and third time and passed.
Sinon, faut jamais.
Need a mover and a seconder, moved by Councillor Suzie, seconded by Conseiller Larin. All those in favor? All those opposed? Carried. So we will be back here at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. We are adjourned at 9:10 p.m. Thanks very much, everyone.